I am Rachel Humphrey with It's Personal Stories, a hospitality podcast, and I am excited to be joined on the show today by a longtime friend of mine, David Eisen, the VP and Editor-in-Chief of Hotels Magazine. David, welcome to the program.
Rachel, it's so great to be with you this morning. When you first asked me to do this, I said to myself, why would she want me on her show? So I really do appreciate you inviting me to talk to you this morning.
Well, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to be able to share with everybody why I wanted you to be on the show, and they're going to get to see and hear some great advice. I will tell you, I get very excited anytime I interview journalists because you have interviewed me a lot. And so now to kind of turn those tables and for me to have an opportunity to put you in the hot seat, I'm not going to lie, is a little bit of evil fun for me. So we will jump right in and get started. Anyone who listens to the show regularly knows that one of the things I love about the industry is how really different everybody's paths to leadership can be, yet you can chart your own path and all end up at the top of an incredible industry. So tell us a little bit about you and if there were any pivotal moments you think that really shaped where you ended up today.
Yeah, well, thank you again for allowing me to share some of that. Even though I have a youthful glow about me, I'm getting older now. So it's like I have to look back on everything that's where I started and where I am kind of now. So, my journey, I would say I'll make it as kind of like as brief as I can. I grew up in the DC area. My father was a lawyer, an attorney, being in that kind of like, DC government bubble. He worked for the FCC. And basically when I grew up, my kind of idea, I guess, for a career was, I'm going to be what my dad was. I'm going to be a lawyer, right? Like, you look at your father and say, I want to aspire to be what he's doing. But I really didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, obviously, when I was younger. And I ended up going to college in Ohio, which was great to get out of kind of like just the East Coast mentality of things. I went to a school called Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, which I just adored. Loved going to school there. Met, you meet some people. It's a very kind of interesting because I grew up in a very kind of diverse kind of a background in terms of where I went to school, which was great. And when you go to a school in Ohio, it's a lot of people who kind of look like you. But at the same time, it was such a great kind of like, 4 years there. And when I was there, I was a political science major. I was like, okay, that seems like a one of those majors that doesn't really mean much, but it could be the path to going to law school after that, which was kind of in the back of my mind when I was there. I probably should have gone to class a lot more, and I think I scheduled too many 8 a.m. classes, which is never a good thing when you're in college, as anyone could probably attest to. And basically, so I went to school there, graduated, went back to the DC area. Maryland is where I kind of grew up, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? Because I really didn't know. And this is one of my actual lessons to any of those young people living out there. Always good to get it maybe right out of college, get an internship, do something like that where you can really jump into something. We don't have to worry so much about financial, success right then. But it's really good, I think, and this is just a tangent, is really kind of look at internships and into things that you really might want to do. So basically what happened with me was like I did like everything else I think that I grew up with. I moved to New York City, right? With like, no money, no place to live kind of thing. I was sleeping on a buddy of mine's bed in the East Village of New York back in the this was like 2000 when in the East Village, I don't know if you know about the East Village, like it's really cool, hip today and affluent, but back then not so much. So it was an interesting time to be there. And I was basically still not exactly knew what I wanted to do. But again, I was like, oh, maybe law school. And I was like 20 at the time. So I ended up working at a very prestigious a law firm called Cravath, Swaine & Moore. I was a paralegal. And when you're like 20 years old and as a paralegal at one of these, blue chip kind of law firms, which Cravath was at the time or still is, you make like really good money doing basically slave work, meaning like you're like making copies or doing just drudgery work for lawyers, right? But at that time, it was kind of cool because you have money in your pocket to spend. And when you're a 20-year-old in 20-something in New York, it's fantastic. So I did that for a few years, but I was starting to think, really, what do I want to do with my life? And I think by working at a law firm, I realized I don't want to be a lawyer. It really wasn't kind of what I think I wanted to do at the time. But I always loved writing. I think it was more so writing, but also just, I love to read. I love to be kind of, I think I was definitely more artistic than I was maybe artistic more over like arithmetic or, with the left side, right side of the brain. That wasn't really my thing. I wasn't someone who was, I leaned more towards going to see movies and things like that. I wasn't really into finance or anything like that. So that's kind of where I was. And I was lucky enough, I got a job in like 2000, I guess it was right after 9/11, somewhere around that. I got a job at the Associated Press working on the sports desk, which for me, and that's another hobby of mine, I love sports, right? So like I was working at the Associated Press on the sports desk, basically as like a low level kind of like copy editor, working with the writers there. And this was like this is like around when the internet was flourishing, but it wasn't like, we would do, like guys would be, the AP writers would be writing about games on the fields or at the stadiums. And then they have to like phone in kind of things. It wasn't like, they were still using like fax machines or whatever it was. So basically I was doing that for a while, working in Associated Press, but that ended. And I'm trying to be as quickly as possible here, Rachel, to get up to speed now. So I was working in Associated Press. I knew I loved writing, but the job was very finite. It ended. And I got a job working at a company that you and I both know called QuestX Media, that runs conferences, but they also have publications as well. I got a job at Travel Agent Magazine writing about the cruise industry, which I knew nothing about. And I was going on cruises with like Carnival and Royal Caribbean. Cruises, by the way, are not my cup of tea. Never. I was writing about something which I was like, oh, you put me on a cruise ship, and like I'm like I want to get off as soon as I step on. But so I did that for a while, and I just kind of stayed there for a while, and it evolved into getting away from cruises and writing about the hotel industry, and it just clicked for me because I always loved hotels. Who doesn't love hotels? From the travel of them. It was weird. Like I always remember taking family trips, and I would be like, the greatest thing thought about hotels is that you get unlimited number of towels. You could just keep asking for towels, and they bring them to you. It didn't matter. You could use a towel for more towels. I could just keep getting as many towels as I want. I just remember
hotel owners everywhere are cringing right now at David's reservations.
Give me the best Turkish towels. But anyway, I took to the hotel industry. I loved it. I love the industry. I love the people, but I also love to write. So it was kind of a great melding of two passions of mine, I guess, with hotels and writing. And I've just, 20 years later, I moved up the ranks from being an associate editor and then managing editor, and then editor-in-chief of a couple of magazines. I worked for a Hotel Manager magazine with a great group of people over there. And now I'm with Hotels Magazine, which has been around, it's a very venerable publication. It's been around since the 1960s, when I wasn't alive. So I'm not that old. But yeah, and it's such a great industry, as you get to meet fabulous people, and you get to write about it. So that's not so bad. That's a long, I'm 48 now. So I tried to give you a good kind of sweeping arc of
48 years in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really interesting lessons in there, certainly picking up and moving to a different city and picking up a different career and then figuring out your way. It actually brings up something that I want to pivot on completely instead of segueing in, because a lot of the journalists that I talk to, when they started, there wasn't a lot of video production. There wasn't a lot of online presence for journalists. And yet, if I'm sharing now, one of the reasons that I wanted to ask you to join me today is you and I, when we met many years ago, was in a journalist capacity, but you also were doing and are doing a lot of moderating. I had the ability to source and select moderators for a variety of different stages, big and small. And your comfort level in topic, in industry leaders that you're comfortable moderating, in really any environment was very different from others. It wasn't about you, it was about the content, it was about the preparation. And as I have evolved my own moderating talents over the years, I've thought back a lot to the lessons that I've learned from you. Talk about public speaking as a journalist. Are you comfortable with it? Are there tricks that you use every time? Do you prepare differently depending on what type of opportunity it is?
Yeah.
I know that's a lot all at once, but.
Interesting. So preparation is key when you're doing public speaking, moderating, whatever it may be. I would say preparation is key, And then when it's time to do it, throw it out the window, forget about it. What I mean by this is that, we go to there's a conference circuit, and I'm lucky enough that I get invited to do a lot of kind of moderating sessions. And typically it's always the PR people you work with that have these clients, and they want to make them as prepared as possible. Which in a way is good, but I always like speaking to people who will get off the talking points. You know what I mean? A lot of the time you sit on and you watch panels, and it can be a little bit robotic, going through the motions. It's always great when you can people let down their guards and maybe say something not untoward, but something that is a little bit, a take that might not be just the kind of the norm. So basically what I like to do for public speaking, if I'm moderating a panel, my big thing is obviously preparation. I always devise questions beforehand. I have meetings, like a meeting with the other panelists, and I send out the questions beforehand. But then when I'm actually doing it, I try to be very kind of like, you want to make it as organic as possible when you're speaking to people. You don't want to make it like just a normal kind of rote Q&A where it's like ask a question, get an answer. You want to kind of really maybe ask a pointed question, and then not just say go to the next one or say how about you, but really gotta kind of break it all down. But like I said before, you need to be prepared, but you also have to improvise and be a little bit kind of off the cuff with things. I think that's what because when you have to remember that you have an audience watching you, you're not the audience, you have an audience there. And, the worst thing you can do is when you look out over, especially like, 2 minutes out, I always look out into the audience to see if people, if there is a sea of people, hopefully there's more than like 5 people watching or there. If they're on their phones, you've lost them. But if you can see people that have like rapt attention, right, and they're actually engaged and they want to hear what you're talking about, what you're asking, and what the panelists are responding to, then you've won. But you really want to, I think, in public speaking, is you want to kind of really connect with whoever you're speaking to from a Q&A perspective, right? But then that allows you to connect to the audience. And I think the best way to do that is to be frank, be off the cuff. Obviously, be prepared to ask questions, but you really want to like find those moments. You got to look for those moments, and they're just like moments where you can like tap into something. For me, I have a very friends of mine or people, colleagues, I have kind of a dry sense of humor, maybe a little bit too dry for some people. But I try to do when I'm speaking, I look for the points of kind of laughter, something funny. I think it keeps the audience engaged, and that's really what I do for when I'm doing public speaking. Is you want to be prepared, but you don't want to make it look like you're too prepared.
It's interesting because some people, I think, would think of a lot of preparation and then off the cuff as complete opposites, but they're actually not. The preparation is what gives you the comfort level to go naturally where the conversation goes. Well, there is a flip side of public speaking, and this is one I've been dying to ask you. You are known for, especially on LinkedIn, speaking your mind, whether it's the dry sense of humor, whether it's a response to something. Often it's very, very short, very, very pointed.
Yeah.
And I think from where I sit that it takes a lot of confidence in an industry, while very big in some ways, also very small, to actually speak your mind. And knowing that it may not be popular, it may in other ways get a laugh. Yeah. But talk to me a little bit about what is it about you that you say, you know what? I know where I am in this industry, and I've got enough confidence just to put whatever happens to be on my mind in that moment out into the air.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that as much as I do, but I haven't got nothing bad has happened to me so far from doing it. Well, so I use LinkedIn a lot. I mean, that's like the one platform I use for work. I feel like it's like you have LinkedIn for work, you have Instagram to like follow the brands that you love, and you have maybe Twitter just to see what crazy thing Elon Musk or Donald Trump might have said or something like that. No politics, I know, on this show. I mean, listen, the problem with a lot of people, not the problem, but a lot of stuff you read is just kind of mechanical out there. People might write something it's very heartfelt, but I think I like to read the stuff where it is a little bit provocative. Maybe I'm not being like provocative, like you're saying something that's really far out there, but the the hotel industry, it gets back to this whole point where I, as a writer and as a journalist, a lot of the work we do, we work with, public relations companies, and they're very important to the whole kind of ecosystem. And they have their clients, which might be Marriott or Hilton or Hyatt, whatever it is, or a hotel owner or that, and that much. And it's very kind of like vanilla, I guess. And what I try to be is like, what Baskin Robbins has, 32 flavors, I don't know. So I try to put takes out there that are kind of like a little bit, again, not to use the word provocative, but something about someone's going to read and be like, either totally agree with it or totally not agree with it, but at least it's something different. It could be something about, the brands. I mean, everyone, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good kind of example, but, everyone talks about, oh, there's too many brands out there or whatever it is, or something like that. And you say, well, I think I wrote something actually like, big deal. There's too many brands out there or something like that. But I said something to the effect of like, you ever look at like Procter and Gamble? There's like 30,000, laundry detergents they have. No one's complaining about it. But you pick and choose, I usually I try to, use LinkedIn for a story that I wrote or someone on my staff has written, and post it up there, but kind of give it some kind of intro that gives it a little bit of a, kind of flavor for that. So I just think confidence in speaking your mind, I think is what people want. I don't think people are out there necessarily, especially, well, I guess it would be interesting because that, and I don't mean to be tangential with this, but it's a lot of people look at journalism nowadays, the media in general, and well beyond, the B2B hotel world. But like, what is the role of a journalist? Are they just there to report the news? I guess so. But, in our industry where it's very granular about what we do, people can get their hotel news press releases from Reuters or the AP or something like that. One of the things I'm not calling anyone out, but I do read obviously other people's work sometimes online, otherwise other, B2B trade. And some of them it's just a regurgitation of the facts, right? Or a regurgitated press release, or, you have a conversation with a CEO or whoever it is, and it's like, one line and then a long quote, one line, a long quote. I think for me, I mean, if I want to do this and make it a career, you have to have a little bit of, intellectual curiosity, or sometimes you need to have a take, and maybe it's your take, and could be wrong, it could be right. That's subjective, but I think it's important for me, at least from an editorial perspective, is to kind of speak my mind, have a stance on something, not push it. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt. I like what you're saying too about getting other people to think. And so when you say something that, I know you use the word provocative, then I sit and think, that's an interesting take. And it actually prompts me to be more curious, or to think, is that something I wish I had said out loud that you do? And so I think that it's not just in your confidence, but the impact it has on those of us who are reading it. I
will say this, there's been many occasions that I've written something on LinkedIn and I've written it and I'm about to hit post and I just delete it because I'm saying to myself, is it really worth it? Do you want to piss this person off? And you really want to? Sometimes I hold back. I mean, I'm not like, but yeah, I think it's nice when you can say something that's just a little bit poignant or different than kind of just what's out there.
I like that. You mentioned a minute ago being on the conference circuit, which a lot of our listeners are, and certainly a lot of the industry. Do you have any tricks of the trade for being on the road as often as you are, other than unlimited towels?
Yeah. Oh, the towel thing is important. So I'll tell you something interesting that your listeners might want to know. So even though I get this all the time, people always come up to me and say like, "Oh, what's your favorite hotel or this or that or loyalty program?" So here's not a secret, but so I write about hotels for a living, the industry, and I try to tell people. Everyone thinks I write about like, "Oh, what's your favorite?" Like again, I'm reviewing hotels. No, that's not what we do. That's not what I do. I write more about brand development or investment or whatever it is. I don't travel that much. I know it's crazy, right? Most of the stuff I do is conference travel. A lot of that, there's the big 4 or 5 conferences of the year that you know about. So like when I travel, it's like almost, it's not like I'm this kind of corporate traveler person who logs like 150,000 miles a year. In fact, I think I was gold on American and I lost that, which is really sad now because now I have to like board with like
Everybody else.
yeah, I'm zone 5 now. Like what is that? Although I
Hit
will
the road.
I will say this. I and someone can correct me. Here's another take. Zones matter nothing. Either you get caught or I've never been caught. Like if I'm zone 4 and I go in with zone 2 or 3, I've never been caught. But that's, hopefully no one from TSA is watching this right now. So I don't have too many like tricks of the trade when I travel. I'll tell you this. I have my own kind of when I go to a new city, I always try to right when I get there, I always do the thing where I unpack all my clothes. I'm like that person who always gets in the room and unpack clothes. And then I always take a walk, or I find there's certain kind of things that I like, and I always kind of look ahead before I get to a city, like what do I want to do when I get there? It's always good, even when you're there for work, to take some time for yourself and kind of explore, right? Just walk to certain areas that might appeal to you. Things like that. I think it's very important when you're on the road to it's kind of self-fulfillment and to get out there. But no real tricks of the trade. I don't really have that, I mean, I bring like I'm very easy. You know what I mean? I listen to like a podcast on the flight or whatever it is. I have been doing this though. I cook. I always I try not to buy food at the airport. I always make my like a sandwich and bring it with me. That's my big thing.
All right. You heard it here. That's the breaking news.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the
yeah. David, I want to ask you, you said in the start of this interview that you were surprised when I asked you to join us. And I think I might get the quote wrong, but I think when I reached out to you, you said that you were flabbergasted that I had asked. And
sure.
In part because, and I know you and I have talked about this before, there's a way of looking at brand CEOs and other industry leaders and questioning, like, am I in that same caliber? Yeah. As you go through the industry and you've been around, like you said, a long time, and you have a lot of credibility and a lot of very influential colleagues and friends, how do you overcome that self-doubt when I first reach out and you're like, am I the right person? Or what would you advise other people maybe that are hesitant to take steps in their career journey because they are experiencing some sort of imposter syndrome, self-doubt, whatever you would classify it as?
No, I think my self-doubt, it's interesting because when I tell people I work in the hospitality industry, it's not really the truth, I guess, right? I work in, I always say to people, here's the thing, Rachel, people ask me all the time what I do, and I literally don't have the 30-second elevators. I can't be like, I'm a banker, or I'm like, I write about the hotel industry, but I'm also the editor-in-chief of a media company. I'm also a VP. I just don't even know really what to say to them. But to your point, it's like, it's not so much like self-doubt. I think I know that I've always thought I've never stopped learning, but a good writer. But when we go to these events or we meet with people in the hotel industry, like what part of that whole kind of ecosystem are we? Like, what role do we play, if any? I think a lot of people, obviously, we kind of chronicle the hotel industry, what I do. So the good thing is the more and more I've done this, I've 2 decades plus in right now, I don't get any kind of nervousness when I'm speaking to an executive. So like, I mean, I'll give you this is a good example. So I was at a Hilton event, and one of the great guys in our industry is Chris Nassetta, who's the CEO of Hilton. And I was getting off the elevator we were on a press trip, and he was there in the lobby area, right? And I walked up to him, and I was like, and you kind of get like when you see people like this in our industry, CEOs, you get a little bit of anxiety. But like, I see other people. What I'm saying is, don't be afraid just to go up to people and start talking to them. And don't talk to them as if like you're just kind of like you want to just house business, or very kind of just the very perfunctory. But I had a conversation with Chris, and we talked and it was the greatest conversation I've ever had with a CEO. We didn't talk about, it was like, I thought it felt like 30 minutes, but it was probably like 2 or 5 minutes, whatever. they have these CEOs, they never stop. And they have handlers, people that like move them around. Like I don't have a handler, like, I do my own thing. For 5 minutes or whatever it was, the hour I was speaking to Chris and Seta, we didn't talk about hotels at all. We shot the S with about golf. And I was like, we were just talking about golf for like a good 5 minutes. And it was such a good conversation, because I think it's good when people get to know you beyond just the work thing, the kind of transactional thing, and have like a real conversation. So it's not so much, it's not so much imposter syndrome. I think it's kind of like, I think when you first start out, there's a nervousness to it all when you go to conferences and when you have one-on-one conversations with people you think that are well above you. Like when you first start out, if you're an associate editor and they'll plop you down with the CEO, it might happen. You know what I mean? You're asking questions, and that person is probably thinking the same thing. They're probably trying to overcome their own self-doubt too, to say like, or am I going to say the right thing or whatever it is. But I think it's just to be in the moment, and just empower yourself to talk to someone, just to talk to someone normally, like you would a friend. I think is very important.
And that's such great advice for building relationships and networking too, to really be your authentic, genuine self.
Because people remember you by that. You know what I mean? You want to be a little bit memorable.
Well, and then your connection is a real connection. It's not a transactional connection.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to remember that and be like, oh, I talked to him again, or I remember that, that person. I mean, there's no better thing when, and by the way, and I'll let everyone know so I don't anger anyone at a conference. I'm horrible with I'm good with faces, names sometimes I'm just terrible with. But it's great when you have that recognition, and you get to a point where you just becomes more and more comfortable. So it's just I think it's about repetition and things like that.
That's great advice. All right, we are going to run short on time, so I'm going to rapid fire a couple of questions that I want to ask you before we wrap up today. You mentioned curiosity earlier, and we could talk all day about, the driving of curiosity as part of leadership. Tell me super fast one thing you're curious about today.
AI in our industry. I still really don't understand the implications of it, but I know they're out there, and I'll be real quick. Brian Chesky, I was at an event, a Skift event, and from Airbnb, the CEO, he said that AI is going to be have more of an impact on the world than the Industrial Revolution.
Wow. Leave that there. Big statement. What's one thing you're curious about outside of the hospitality industry?
If the Baltimore Orioles, which is my baseball team, are gonna sign a good starting pitcher in the offseason. That's all. I knew
it had to be sports related. Yeah. Okay. When you pivoted from paralegal, wannabe lawyer to journalism, or as you became, flew through the ranks, you certainly came across a skill maybe that you didn't realize would be so important. What was it?
Oh, a skill. That's tough. I think going back to being in our industry, you have to talk to a lot of people. So you got to get out of your shell, and you have to be comfortable just speaking your mind and speaking to people, asking questions, being direct. Don't be sheepish. That's the biggest thing. Like, don't be aloof. The biggest thing I see with when I see other journalists or writers when they're in a room, like circulate, like go up to people. People enjoy it when you speak to them. So be confidence. I mean, maybe I didn't always have it, and maybe I still don't have it now. But I think you have to develop that skill and be confident.
I love that. And then my favorite question of all time: what do you tell 20-year-old David graduating from Miami of Ohio who thinks he may or may not want to follow in his dad's footsteps? What do you tell him either about how things worked out or something you wish you knew then that you know today?
Well, I could fill up another 30-minute podcast with all the regrets I've had in my life. That's for the book, The Great American Novel, that I'm going to write one day. Okay. Let's see. That's a tough one, Rachel. Is this the last question? I'm gonna screw this one up because I don't have a good answer for you.
Oh, I'm gonna give you one last question.
What's my advice? No, just always try to keep learning. That's a bad answer. See, I'm being truthful. Well, in my profession, one of your advice is always never stop learning. Always reading is so important. Read everything you can get your hands on. When I was younger, I didn't read as much as I do now. I try to be a voracious reader of everything. but don't just read like not, read everything you can, read fiction, read nonfiction, read the newspaper, whether it's on a tablet or in your hand.
Read Hotels Magazine.
Read Hotels Magazine. Yeah, that's you plugged me. I didn't. Education, I'll be real quick with this one. Education matters. Okay, one of the big, I'm not going to call it mistakes, was like I know that we're at the end of all this. Education matters, but there is a huge cost sometimes too. You have to look at the value versus whether to do it versus the kind of the value, the ROI. I would say this: if you want, and this is not me as a writer, but going back to law school, if you want to be a lawyer, you got to get a law degree. If you want to be a doctor, you got to get a medical degree. You don't necessarily need a degree to be Chris Nassetta or the late great Arnie Sorensen or Eric Danziger, these CEOs. What you need to do, right? If you want to work in the hotel industry, depending on whatever it is, go work at a hotel first and foremost. And that goes back to the internship. If you're like, I want to be in hospitality, but I want to be a general manager one day, or I want to be the CDO, Chief Development Officer at Wyndham, go work at a hotel. You don't always need to go to school for it, but make sure you get that kind of like that practical, introduction to it all.
I actually share that advice a lot as someone who went to law school and had a lot of college and law school debt, having paid for both of them myself. I think about the ROI and I advise on it all the time.
It's the truth. I got my master's degree in hospitality. Education is always great. There's no substitute for it, learning, but sometimes when you have to kind of, when you're young, look for mentors and ask people what they think. Don't always go it all on your own, but you have to look at kind of the time and the value of money and all that stuff.
I love that so much. Well, David, as I expected, we are short on time. We are actually over time, but I appreciate so much your joining us and sharing your journey to leadership, some of the insights you've learned along the way. Look forward to hearing many more of them over time, but really appreciate your joining me today.
Thank you, Rachel. It's been great.
And for those listening at home, we hope you'll head over to itspersonalstories.com and hear from not only David again, but nearly 200 industry leaders who've shared their journeys and their insights as well. We appreciate you joining us and hope you have a great day.